Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I want to talk to you about all the books I read in October. Okay, so this will be the normal format for one of these videos. I will talk to you about all the books I read in October, very briefly each one, and I will go through them from the one I enjoyed the least to the one I enjoyed the most. So I've got 26 books, assuming I've counted them correctly. I've got 26 books to talk to you about. There were 3 books that I had on my TBR for October, which I didn't manage to get to, which were The Devil's End by D.A. Fowler, which was for Kelly Hooked on Books' From Hell book club. And all 3 of these, I would say, I said I didn't manage to get to them. I started them and didn't get very far with them. So I read just the first few pages of each of them and just wasn't really feeling them, wasn't in the right mood for them at the time. So I wouldn't call them DNFs, more just like, not right nows. So yeah, The Devil's End by D.A. Fowler anyway. Havana Red by Leonardo Padura, and The Butcher by Laura Cat Young. So I will try these again at some point in the future, but just didn't feel like the right time for me with them this month. So 26 books to go through, most of them physical, but there are some Kindle books as well. So let me get on with it. So the first one, so this was my least favourite book of the month. So this was a book I read as a buddy read with Shannon from Shannon's Bookish Musings. And any channel that I mention, I'll leave a link to in the description, and I'll leave a list of all of the books in the description as well. So you can refer to that if you fancy any of them yourselves. So my least favourite book of the month, which I imagine, given what I'm going to say about it, you won't fancy, was Last Time I Lied by Riley Sagar. Which just wasn't really very good. So it just felt very formulaic. It's one of those kind of mystery thrillers with 2 different timelines going on about this young woman who, when she was a kid, was at this summer camp and some other people disappeared, and she's now gone back as an adult to the summer camp and weird stuff's happening again. So it was fine. I finished it, but I certainly didn't really enjoy it. And to be fair, I wasn't really expecting to read. I didn't have high hopes for that one. The next book, so my second least favourite book of the month, I did have really high hopes for. And this was Hell House by Richard Matheson. So we read this as part of my book club kind of reading group. So this was a book that was chosen in the birth year book tag by Michael K. Vaughan as his favourite book from his birth year of 1971. I really like the Richard Matheson books I've read in the past, so I was really expecting to like this, but I just didn't get on with it at all. So it's a fairly graphic haunted house story about some people going to a famous haunted house to kind of investigate the hauntings, and I just didn't get into it. I finished it, but it never clicked with me for some reason. One that I didn't particularly enjoy, unfortunately. After that then, we have Marauders of Gore by John Norman. So I have been reading through these Gore books. So this is book 9 in the series. So if you don't know these, this is a long-running fantasy series that started in the 70s, which mixes kind of colourful pulp fantasy, which can be quite enjoyable, and this is what the series is most famous for, some very dubious philosophising about sexual politics. So Gore, where the books are set, is a land where women are, for the most part, enslaved and are happy to be enslaved. And the books definitely feel like a response from John Norman to the feminist movement in the 70s in the US. So they're quite objectionable in many ways. And when he goes off on one, as he does quite a lot in this book, about his views on his views on the various roles of men and women in society, the books are not much fun, but when he does pulp fantasy stuff, they're a lot of fun. So this book, the first 2/3 was a bit of a slog, but the final third, which is basically just one long battle scene, I really, really enjoyed. So yeah, definitely not one of my favourite books of the month, but the final third redeemed it for me. Okay, moving on then. So next up, a Kindle book. So this was Vampire Hunter D by Hideyuki Kikuchi. So the first of the Vampire Hunter D novels, of which there are dozens. So this was quite fun. So it's a set in a post-apocalyptic future. where there are vampires and werewolves and stuff like that, and there are people who specialise in hunting, one of the different creatures. So this book follows vampire hunter D and his kind of adventures chasing vampires and stuff like that. So it was very silly, but I did quite enjoy it. It was quite a lot of fun. Next up then, another series that I am reading through. So this is book 16 in the Edge series by George D. Gilman, called The Final Shot. So the Edge books are a series of very brutal westerns written by an Englishman in the 70s. So this one was kind of nothing special in the series, but still enjoyable. So Edge, who's the hero, kind of going on escapades throughout the Wild West. In this one, he gets arrested and is imprisoned for murder. So yeah, it was a fun read, but not a standout book in the series. Next up, another one I read for a book group. So this was a buddy read with MJ from Reading This Life and people from her channel. So this was Lost Horizon by James Hilton, which is a 30s kind of adventure novel about a plane that crashes in the Himalayas, I think it is, and the survivors of the crash discover Shangri-La. So discover this society where kind of people live for very long, or live to a very long age, very old age. That's the word I'm looking for. So yeah, that was it was fine. It was an entertaining kind of vintage read, but I didn't absolutely love it. Something completely different next. Again, this was for a kind of group read. So this was Only Child, or it's also known as Stranglehold, by Jack Ketchum. So this was a read along with people from the Plagued by Visions Discord server. So I've really enjoyed is the wrong word. I have been impressed by most of the Jack Ketchum books I've read. I was less impressed by this one than any of the others. So it's about a woman who's in an abusive relationship, who's trying to escape from that relationship with her son, and about the appalling things that the husband has done in that relationship. So it was definitely very tense and suspenseful at times. It was incredibly horrible at times. So some of the details of the things he's done are appalling, and it was very disturbing. So definitely a book that comes with lots of trigger warnings for domestic abuse and things like that. But towards the end, like the final third, just didn't hang together at all. There were just too many coincidences and just things that happened that just didn't feel at all realistic, and it completely lost me, unfortunately, at that point. So yeah, not as good as I expected it to be, and certainly not as good as the other Ketchum books I've read. Next, again, something completely different. So Fever Pitch by Nick Hornby, the famous book about football fandom. So this was a book that was recommended to me by a subscriber, DDB, who's been badgering me for ages to read a sports book. So I promised him I'd read one, and he asked me to read this one, so I did. So this was fine. So it was quite insightful, nicely written, very funny at times, quite moving at times. And certainly very readable, but at the end of the day, it's about football, which I have absolutely no interest in, and therefore was less of a hit with me than it might have been. But still an interesting read, and a good book about kind of hobbies and obsessions and things like that. So I did find that side of it interesting. Next, another series that I'm reading through. So this is the Executioner series by Don Pendleton. So this was book 15 in the series. What's it called? Panic in Philly. So this has Mac Bolan, who's the hero, going to Philadelphia to fight the mafia, which is basically what he does in all the books. So yeah, a fun men's adventure. Very silly. Some really good action scenes in this one. But yeah, nothing to write home about, but a very enjoyable quick read. Okay, a few more Kindle books next then. So as part of my challenge to read 12 classic books that were recommended by Michael K. Vaughan in a video he did, I read the Iliad by Homer, which was, as I've done a review of that one, which is up on the channel, was not really what I was expecting in terms of it missing, I expected it to be about the Trojan War, which it is, but it's more a book that's set during the Trojan War than a book about the Trojan War, if that makes sense. So it had lots of good kind of adventure, loads of battle scenes, some real like quite explicit gore, which I quite enjoyed, but it's really repetitive. It's quite long, and it was missing, some of the things I was really expecting, like the Trojan Horse, for example. So I didn't enjoy it hugely as a result. After that, another book that I've read for my challenge to read all these classics that Michael suggested. So I'm doing one of the books he suggested, or it's not really even a book, the works is the complete Sherlock Holmes. So I'm reading through those gradually rather than doing them all in one go. So I read the first novella in the series, A Study in Scarlet, which I had read before. So it's got a lot that's fun about it. You get to meet Holmes and Watson. You get all the classic stuff of Holmes, meeting someone for the first time and then telling them what they had for breakfast 3 days ago, which is really good fun. But there's this weird bit towards the end of the book, or kind of midway through the book, where it suddenly diverts to not being about Holmes at all, being like a load of backstory about Mormons in America, and it's just a bit weird and completely ruins the flow of the story, in my opinion. After that then, I read, well not after that, but next up in terms of my rankings, Hairspray and Switchblades by V. Castro, which was a deliberately cheesy and very entertaining kind of quick horror novella about a woman who can turn into, I can't remember what animal she turns into, some kind of big cat who's kind of trying to battle a serial killer. Like full-on kind of 80s style cheese, but very entertaining. After that, another kind of entertaining horror novel. So Patricia Wants to Cuddle by Samantha Allen, which is a new release, came out very recently, which is about a kind of reality TV show that happens to be being filmed somewhere where there's a Bigfoot as well. So Bigfoot kind of invades the events of the reality TV show. It was not as good as I was expecting it to be. So I had quite high hopes for this one. It was quite entertaining. It was quite kind of scathing about reality TV, quite amusing at times. I had some really good characters, but the horror elements of it felt, kind of peripheral to me. They felt like they were done for effect rather than because they had anything to the story, really. A bit of a miss for me, that one, unfortunately. Next up then, a book that was sent to me by the author, Call to the Void by Roberto Poff. So I will do something on this in a forthcoming Small Press Spotlight video. So I'll do a longer review of it in that. But this was a short story collection of horror stories, quite a range of different things in here, but all of them really quite interesting. A nice variety. Some great kind of displays of imagination. So he's definitely got a fantastic imagination, and some really good dialogue as well. So there was a lot I enjoyed about this. Look out for a further discussion of this in a future video. Next up, another of the series I'm reading through. This might be I think this is the last I'll be talking about today of kind of the long-running series that I'm reading through. So this is the Survivalist series. So this was book 8, The End is Coming by Jerry Ahern. So this is a series of post-apocalyptic men's adventure books about, written in the 80s, and they really feel like they were written in the 80s, about a guy battling across a kind of post-nuclear apocalypse America to get back to his family, fighting Russian soldiers. All sorts of good stuff going on. So this is the 8th in the series, and sees one kind of storyline that's been going on for a few books coming to an end, and another one that's kind of been bubbling under, kind of picking up speed a bit. So really entertaining. They're very good kind of action adventure type books. These really good action, but he keeps the plot moving at a really good rate, and does a great job of kind of juggling different things going on at once as well. So they're always fun and interesting, these books. I'm really enjoying them. Next, another book that was sent to me by the author, who is indeed a subscriber to the channel as well, and a frequent commenter. So this was Dog Meat by Priscilla Bettis. So I talked about this in a Small Press Spotlight video I did a couple of weeks ago. I thought this was really good. So it's a kind of dystopian novel about a society which feels a lot like it might be kind of communist China, and particularly about one young man in that society whose job it is to slaughter dogs for consumption at a restaurant. So very dark, so has some very troubling, distressing scenes of him doing his job, basically. But at its heart, it's a book about an individual kind of trying to escape the confines of the society they live in and make the life they want for themselves. So it was quite definitely disturbing at times, but also moving and very, very readable. Another one that I talked about in that same Small Press Spotlight video, which again was sent to me by the author, who again is a subscriber and regular commenter. So this was The Forgotten Boy by Troy Tradup, which is a really, really entertaining werewolf novel. So just one of those books that doesn't do anything out of the ordinary, but everything it does very, very well. So just simply written, good plot, good characters, some good scenes of horror, just a lot of fun from beginning to end. So a really strong central character who's this teenage boy who's kind of on the cusp of adulthood, who's trying to figure out, what direction his life's going in, who gets bitten by a werewolf, becomes a werewolf, and actually finds he quite likes it because it gives him a power he's never had before. So a really, really enjoyable werewolf book, if you like that kind of thing. Next, I read the second chronologically of the Elric of Melniboné series by Michael Moorcock, which is The Fortress of the Pearl. So I didn't enjoy this quite as much as the first one, which I read read last month actually. But it was still it's a really good kind of sword and sorcery type adventure. Moorcock's imagination is fantastic. Elric is a really cool kind of anti-hero. So yeah, there's a lot to enjoy here, and some a fantastic setup. So the setup is basically that Elric gets tricked by this guy to go and find this pearl, which is really valuable. And basically the guy gives him a drink which actually has poison in it, and the only way Elric can get the antidote is to go and get this pearl. So he has to do it to save his own life. So yeah, a very entertaining fantasy read. I enjoyed that a lot. Slightly better than that then. So going through, and we're certainly into the top 10 now. Not quite sure how many I've got here. About 10. So again, I have done a review of this on the channel already. So Inner City Hoodlum by Donald Goines. So a really entertaining 70s crime novel about a young black guy who is kind of trying to make his way in the community he lives in, and falls into working for this gangster. So about his kind of escapades and what happens in his relationship with this gangster, and also about what happens with his sister, who's also going kind of on a similar journey herself. So really gritty, quite violent at times, but just completely entertaining and fascinating and interesting from first page till last. I really enjoyed that. Just above that, an independently published horror book which I did a review of yesterday, Halloween Slaughter by Sergio Gomes, so the second in his Slaughter series. A really enjoyable slasher, so watch the review I did of it for more information. But yeah, just a kind of throwback to 80s slasher movies, but just pitch perfect. A bit like The Forsaken Boy. It doesn't do anything out of the ordinary. It draws on tropes and things like that quite a lot, but it does it really, really well. And sometimes that can make for a perfect book. It's just pure enjoyment from beginning to end, really suspenseful, quite gory at times, but just consistently entertaining. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I really, really liked it. Next then, and again I've done a video review of this one, so my first Junji Ito book, Shiver. So a fantastic collection of, I think it's 9 short stories by Junji Ito, the kind of master of horror manga. So yeah, fascinating ideas, really good storytelling, but really it's the concepts that grab you. So much absolutely bonkers and disturbing stuff going on in this book. Really, really enjoyable. Next then, another crime novel by an African American author. So this is A Rage in Harlem by Chester Himes from the 1950s. So set in Harlem, about a guy who gets conned and him trying to get his money back, basically. The first in Chester Himes' Harlem Cycle, which I'm going to be reading through. Again, I really, really enjoyed this. It's got fantastic dialogue, amazing characters, an interesting plot with lots of twists and turns, and was just a great depiction of the community of Harlem in the 1950s and what it was like. Really, really brilliant stuff. Slightly ahead of that, another horror short story collection Poking Holes by Juan Valencia. Juan is the host of the fantastic channel Played by Visions. So this was just incredibly disturbing. I have done a review of this, so have a look at that for more information. But yeah, a very interesting, very challenging at times, quite experimental at times, but just brilliantly imaginative and absolutely horrible collection of short stories. Highly recommended if you like that kind of thing. Just ahead of that, another book from a booktuber. So we're into the top 3 now. So this is my 3rd favourite book of the month. Didn't know what to expect from this. I'm not normally a poetry fan, and it's a poetry book, but I absolutely love this. This is Hey Bert by Roberto Pastore from the channel Pastore Time. So just a really lovely collection of poems. I'm not, as I said, I'm not really into poetry, but every poem in this book affected me in a different way. Some of them made me really happy, some of them made me really sad, some of them are funny, some of them are sweet. Just a really lovely collection, and he's got a great way, and I suppose this is the art of poetry, isn't it, is of using just a few words to conjure up an emotion or an image in your mind, and just allowing you as the reader to kind of ruminate on that image or that emotion. And just to kind of toss ideas around in your head. I love this. I thought it was really, really good. I'm going to read it again soon. Okay. My second favourite book of the month then was Cujo by Stephen King. So I read this as a buddy read with Gareth from the channel Book Songs and Other Magic. It's a book I've read before, but years and years and years ago, so I didn't remember it that well. This was fantastic. It was much better than I expected it to be. I expected it to be like a 4-star read, solidly enjoyable and suspenseful Stephen King novel. But for me, it was a 5-star read. I thought it was brilliant. Even the bits that feel like they should be boring are interesting. Like there's bits where, like, the husband of the family that are involved is kind of off on a business trip, and you get quite a lot of detail about that, more than you really need. But King still makes it fascinating. But yeah, the main part of the story clearly is about a woman and her son trapped in a car by this St Bernard dog that's got rabies, and it's just incredibly suspenseful. The way he just pulls everything together and ramps things gradually up. You know going into the book what's going to happen, and it takes quite a long time for them to get to that point, but you're never bored on that journey. And when they're actually there, the tension is so high. It's just incredible. A really fantastic piece of popular fiction. I loved it. So my number 1 book of the month then was Farewell My Lovely by Raymond Chandler, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. It is very, very racist at times, which I was much less of a fan of, but it's a fantastic detective novel, and the dialogue and the writing are just wonderful. Nobody, I think, does that kind of hard-boiled style of writing quite as well as Raymond Chandler does, and this is a fantastic example of it. And the plot was really engaging and interesting too. So yeah, a very, very good book. So time for a random book from the shelves. Today's is Weapons of Math Destruction by Cathy O'Neill. How Big Data Increases Inequality and Threatens Democracy. So definitely a fascinating subject, and a book I'm keen to read soon. I need to try and make time for this in my schedule, because I think it's a really important topic. So I hope you enjoyed that. That's the 26 books I read this month, gone through. Do let me know if you've read any of them and what you thought of them. Do let me know what you've been reading this month. Yeah, it's been a really good month for me. I've read some fantastic books, some that weren't quite so great, but most of them were very good indeed. And I've had some fantastic indie books in there as well, all of which I really enjoyed. So yeah, definitely a good month. But let me know how your reading months have been. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.